Okay. Good evening. It is 7 o'clock, and we are going to have our town council meeting today. It is Monday, February 12th, 2024, at 7 o'clock p.m. Can we please stand for the, actually, can we do the roll call?
It's a rough start.
Sorry.
William Diedzik,
Here, Madam Clerk.
James Morelli,
Here.
Toni Morrison,
Here.
Christopher Palmieri,
Here.
Jack Perry,
Here.
Jennifer Klock,
Here.
Michael Del Santo,
Present.
Valerie DiPaolo, Paul Chaplinsky.
Here, and Councilwoman DiPaolo did indicate to me that she was going to be absent today, so we have 8 council members and a quorum. Councilman Bill Dietzick is participating remote for the record.
And,
Can we?
and just one of Councilwoman DiPaolo actually planned to be here. She was on the fence, but because of this pending storm, she wasn't able to get back in time. So
Okay.
she apologized she couldn't be here, but she did try to make an attempt to get here.
Thank you. Can we please stand for the prayer and flag salute?
Heavenly Father, may we consider the people of Southington and always render what is right and just for our citizens. Help us to be compassionate while still seeking what is appropriate for the entire community. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if you'll please remain standing, we're going to have a moment of 2 moments of silence, please. The first moment of silence we're going to have is for Bill Queen. Bill was a local person from Southington who was an avid coach in town of youth leagues and also the Southington High School assistant girls basketball coach. So I'd like to have a moment of silence for Bill, who passed away recently. Thank you. I'd also like to ask that we have a moment of silence for a longtime Italian in our community, Anthony Tosh Tarfano, who was an active member in the Unico, Elks, the SHS Gridiron, president. He was also a U.S. Army National Guardsman, a member of the American Legion Post 72. And I'd like to take a moment of silence for Tosh Tarfano, please. Thank you, everybody. Okay, I'm looking for a motion for the meeting minutes from our last meeting, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from January 22nd.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, can we, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to abstain.
Okay, so Madam Chair, we have 2 abstentions, so it's 6-0-2 with Councilman Dietzick and Councilman Perry abstaining. Okay, we're going to start the meeting off with a guest to present a little presentation on Black History Month, a topic near and dear to a number of people's hearts in town, and a wonderful topic about some history in our community that I think many will be interested in. We have with us Christina Volpe, who is the Barnes Museum Director? Curator. Okay. The Barnes Museum Curator, who's going to have a presentation with a PowerPoint, and what we will do is, Christina, when you're done, if you don't mind emailing the town clerk the presentation, we will put your presentation into the record so that people can view it at any time.
Well, absolutely.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, respected council members. I'm so grateful to be here tonight discussing a bipartisan project to bring about some hidden history in our community. This has been an effort of many of you that are sitting here before us. I'll name you all in a little bit. But this has been something that's been going on for quite a while before my tenure here at the Barnes Museum. So I am a curator, but I am also a historian with a master's in public history, and I'm a PhD student at Salve Regina University. And I have experience doing this type of history and archaeology for a while across our state. But this is an especially important project because it brings to light some of the Black and Indigenous history that has happened here in Southington. And this story actually goes back to before we were even a town. This goes back to the Reverend Jeremiah Curtis, the Southington Congregational Church's first Reverend. The Southington Congregational Church is currently getting ready to celebrate their 300th anniversary. So we really are going back quite a bit here. But why Jeremiah Curtis? He was a Yale graduate. He served as Southington's first pastor after doing his work at Yale College. And when he got married, he married a woman named Hannah. And upon that marriage, Hannah had inherited an enslaved person. This was a very common practice back then. Enslaved people were often given as part of dowries. Now, Peter Tusco, the gentleman that was enslaved, was given to them as a marriage present, and immediately afterwards was manumitted. Now, what is manumission? Manumission is not exactly emancipation, because it's not legal to be a free person of color in America at this time. So manumission grants you rights and freedoms to own property, to own belongings. However, you are not still entirely free. From all purposes, though, this is a very early sentiment towards abolition, which is getting rid of slavery, right? Which is emancipation. So the fact that during this time, Mr. Tusco is manumitted is quite significant. It's not happening at a large scale because that would be against what society is practicing at that time. In 1755, Mr. Jeremiah Curtis received the plot that today continues to consist of Curtis Farm. So this area known as Curtis Farm is located off of South End Road, and at one point was over-encompassing 100-plus acres. Today, it still has quite a few acres, is just much smaller. But what does that mean? Well, for Peter Tusco, this is him, it meant following his manumission that he was allowed to be a property owner. This is his will that you can get on Ancestry. That's where I got it. A couple of things are significant here. We know what Peter Tusco's job was because of what's in his will. We knew that he was probably a livery hand, which means that he likely rode hacks, took care of horses and stables, that he owned a significant bit of property, but most significantly, he owned 13 acres of land. Pretty unheard of for a manumitted, formerly enslaved person. Now, this is his internment stone, which is in Oak Hill Cemetery. For the longest time, it was assumed stolen. I'm very happy to report that it is back where it belongs, having just been taken out by John Deere.
Okay.
Yeah, pause for comedic development. So John Deere, the lawnmower, took out the stone, and we're very lucky that the current sexton of Oak Hill Cemetery recovered the stone in storage and has done every precaution with best preservation practices to put it back in its place, and so you can go see it now or in the fall when the Barnes Museum does our walking tours. So Peter Tusco is back, and on his stone it says he was a Spanish Indian, free man. Very important. This language is very important for the time because it really means that he had agency on his own life. Some people have asked in the past, well, what is a Spanish Indian? It's very unclear. In the early American Republic, Spanish Indians were often known as possibly indigenous peoples from the South Carolina to the Florida region. It also could be someone who came from Hispaniola, which is the island today of Haiti, right, and the Dominican Republic. So it's hard to tell based off of that and not having any renderings from Peter Tusco himself, other than his signature signing his will in 1767, which is also indicative of the fact that he could write his own name. The rest of the will is written in a different hand, and his executor of his will was Mr. Reverend Jeremiah Curtis. When Peter Tusco passed away, he gave all of his land to their daughter and said that if she dies, it can go back to Hannah and Mr. Curtis himself. This is interesting. Why would he do that? It's very likely that the 13 acres of land that he owned directly abutted the Curtis land, right? That he lived not far from the family, continued to work with the family because that would have been what was safest for him at that time. Again, this is a pre-free America. Moving along, we have a little bit of a timeline. Promise there will be no pop quiz. But just to illustrate where this is going, in 1738, Peter Tusco's purchased. That same year, he's given to Hannah and Jeremiah Curtis in Southington. In 1767, he passes away after having lived a pretty full life here in Southington, acquiring land and objects. He then pays out of his will to be buried and have his interment stone made at Oak Hill Cemetery. 1784, Connecticut passes its first anti-slavery law, which basically said anyone born after this date in 1784, once they reach the age of 25, are free. Now, that was progressive at that time. Again, we are still years ahead of the American Civil War. 1795, Jeremiah Curtis dies. 1798, his grandson, Carlos Curtis, is born. This is important because we're going to continue this narrative with the grandson, Carlos Curtis. Somebody asked me earlier, well, what about Carlos's dad? Well, as you can imagine, it's pretty hard as historians, even today with all the resources available to us, to go into these people's lives and figure out why they were doing this highly illicit and illegal activity at the time, because this is illegal activity, for the most part, especially when he's manumitted. That's not legal to do that at that time. As your property, you're allowed to do what you want, but again, I digress. So 1798, Carlos Curtis, his grandson, is born, and then 1842, Carlos Curtis becomes a justice of the peace, which today harkens to a lot more of what we consider attorneys and lawyers. Justices of the peace had a lot of powers. Now, this says a lot. I'm going to summarize it for you, but for the record, I felt like it was important. So 1842, Carlos Curtis becomes a justice of the peace for Hartford County, representing Southington. In 1852, this is according to an online record I first found, he subscribes to the Oberlin Evangelist, one of the earliest anti-slavery movement newspapers in the country. 1859, he subscribes to another such newspaper by the American Missionary Association, who utilized the Second Awakening, the religious revival that occurred here in the North, to basically say every soul deserves a chance to be saved. This is really where the anti-slavery movement comes out, right? It's this idea of religious revivalism changing how people feel towards slavery, and why everybody deserves a chance, like I said, to be saved, to have a life. Now, around this time, there's a lot of lore coming out later about Mr. Curtis and his involvement in what we know as the Underground Railroad. Now, because of his position as Justice of the Peace, it's very likely that he took his abolitionist leanings to assist enslaved people in their self-emancipation. I want to make sure I say that again. Enslaved people freed themselves. They made the choice to leave where they were and go on a harrowing journey. It's people like Carlos Curtis who advocate along the way in these very white spaces that they enter in order for them to go beyond, right? To get to Canada or to get more northward to freedom. But it really is enslaved people taking their lives into their own hands and trusting people possibly like Mr. Curtis. To illustrate that, this is not a time where the country is very cool about this kind of stuff. This image that I have here that says Marion P.O. is from the Curtis family papers. And it has two names on there that are very pertinent to my work at the Barnes Museum, Philo Barnes and Levi Upson. This is a receipt that Carlos Curtis had in his papers. He was the distributor of the American Missionary paper, and so the paper was sent to him. It was his job to collect the dues for that paper and to distribute the paper out to these people. These two names, Philo Barnes and Levi Upson, are connected to the Barnes Museum. Levi Upson is the father of Captain Andrew Upson, who fought and died in the American Civil War from 1861 to 1865. He was a fervent abolitionist, Captain Andrew Upson, and at the Barnes Museum we have over 200 of his letters that he wrote home from the front. And some of these things are very passionate, so clearly Mr. Andrew Upson, this was a great find for us, right? That his father also felt abolitionist sentiment as well. Now, this little snippet that I have here about Philo Barnes is very interesting. It comes from an 1895 newspaper clipping that says, Philo Barnes was one of the early abolitionists who suffered severely for their teachings, which at that time were regarded as extremely dangerous. When Wendell Phillips and William Lloyd Garrison were threatened with violence in Boston in 1835, the image on the left depicts that riot, known as the Boston Riot in 1835. Mr. Barnes was addressing abolition meetings in Southington, and the best citizens were killing his cattle, burning his barns, and setting fire to his dwelling in their efforts to stamp out the damnable heresies of abolitionists. What's interesting is 1835 to 1842, we see these acts against anti-slavery movement people. 1842, Carlos Curtis's barn is burned down. I don't know, but that's part of it, right? It's interesting. It's an interesting quip, especially knowing that around 1835, 1836, Philo Barnes, who's living not far from Mr. Curtis, also suffers a similar fate. And you can see here that Philo paid $2, $3, and $2 over the course of 1855, 56, and 57. That's about anywhere between $80 to $100 in today's money. So these people aren't poor. This is the anti-slavery movement amongst white abolitionists was built upon those who had the wealth to contribute to the movement. So this is also from Mr. Curtis's papers. Mr. Carlos Curtis here is paying for the Emancipator and Free American, two abolitionist journals that come out in the late 1830s, early 1840s. This is part of why people are getting riled up. This actually stirs quite a bit of commotion, especially between the South and the North, which we see come out about 20 years later. So he's paying here $2, again, which is about $80 to $100. In 1842, around the time his barn burns down, to the Massachusetts Abolitionist Society. The Emancipator and Free American are two separate journals, so that means that he's receiving both journals at this time. I don't know about you, but it sounds like he has a hobby. It sounds like he really is interested in learning this stuff. And beyond that, at the same time that Mr. Curtis is doing all of this, he is also the executor of several estates in town. He's representing two people at their divorce hearings, which is super interesting at this time. And at this time, we are processing at the Southington Historical Society about 300 pieces of ephemera, which is just general things like this receipt, like the document I showed you on the previous side. Processing meaning we're reading it, we're seeing what it says, what was he doing. One really interesting thing from this collection is he was the executor of the estate of Willis Bradley, a second cousin to the Bradleys of the Barnes Museum, who was found in Cleveland, Ohio, deaf, dumb, and insane, and had to be brought back here. Carlos Curtis goes and gets him, brings him back here, which is important because that means that he is traveling, right? Carlos Curtis does travel, and that's important for our next slide here. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 was a law that was a compromise. This is a newspaper clipping from that time sort of depicting William Lloyd Garrison, the writer of another newspaper called The Liberator, against Southern plantation owners trying to recapture enslaved people. The Fugitive Slave Act said that if you are an enslaved person and you are found having run away, that you are entitled to go out and find that person and bring them back for a bounty. It actually created a sort of commerce around this practice. Now, at the same time, you have justices of the peace like Carlos Curtis potentially going out and getting them. You had to be of a certain juncture, like a sheriff, like a justice of the peace, in order to determine this, in order to either turn a formerly enslaved person in or to collect the bounty on them. You had to sign off with the justice of somebody of the law, right? So this puts Carlos Curtis in a really interesting position. He is clearly a man of authority. He's clearly trusted in his community, and he also travels quite a bit. So it makes it very realistic that this map of the Underground Railroad in Connecticut could potentially be the route that Carlos Curtis was taking. Now, these sites, not all of them have been proven to have been on the Underground Railroad, especially the ones with dashes. But you can see there's a solid line that runs from New Haven through Southington to Farmington. One thing we do know for certain is that Farmington was a station on the Underground Railroad. They had a big abolitionist society there. The Amistad trials, which happened years prior to this, really made Farmington become a place of anti-slavery. And so according to the lore, Carlos Curtis would go down to New Haven, pick up enslaved peoples, hide them in his hay cart or in his wagon, transport them to Southington, harbor them overnight, and then bring them to Farmington so that they could then go on to Canada or where have you on their next destination. Now, it's very rare that we find a conductor and a harborer in one person. But where Carlos Curtis is interesting is that he did go to New Haven quite a bit. It's where he sold his cabbages. And we actually now have a receipt because somebody got mad they bought a rotten cabbage. So it's very possible that he did harbor enslaved peoples in New Haven and bring them to Southington because clearly he was making, if not monthly, bi-monthly trips down to New Haven to sell his goods on his farm. Another important thing to note is that if Carlos Curtis was stopped along this route, I'm a justice of the peace. I'm returning this enslaved person. I'm a justice of the peace. I am getting my bounty, right? I'm bringing them to Hartford because that's what you would do in Connecticut. You'd bring them to Hartford. From there, another unit would deal with them and bring them back to their alleged owners. Now, this is interesting. In 1790, here in Southington, we had a population of about 1,000 people. And we had a population of about 43 enslaved people in Southington. Now, while we're at this time, we're still not pre-emancipation, but on the 1850 census, we have about 22 enslaved people in Southington. So it's not a predominantly black community back then, so it wouldn't have been proper for Mr. Curtis to talk about this, right? You see what Philo went through. He's not going to project this illicit behavior that he's doing. So it is very likely that he did hide them on his wagon. This is important because this is the part of the story that unless we find a written note that says, I harbored enslaved people, right? And many people don't write their illegal activities down, right? It's very hard to prove whether he did this or not. But one thing that might help us is the site itself, where he allegedly held enslaved people while assisting them. So this is a root cellar. Today on the Curtis site, which you can view from a parcel of open space, you will see what looks like a fieldstone cellar. They're very popular here in New England, especially in Connecticut. Farmers, when they're digging up that land, we are a rocky state. What do we do with all those rocks? Well, a lot of people use them to either build foundations or reinforce their cellars, to make root cellars. Exactly what it sounds like. Root vegetables, onions, potatoes, things like that would stay safe, nice and cool in the ground, protected by those stones. Now, many root cellars today are built into hills or built underground, and this one was underneath the Curtis barn. The Curtis barn has since been torn down, but again, the site itself is now visible, so you can actually see the root cellar itself if you are enjoying the Southington open space area, and you'll see kind of this vestige of where it was. This is an inaccurate depiction of what it was like, but this is a typical depiction. Root cellars, you would have been able to access it, so you would have been able to walk down. It would have been a space. Now, I think this image looks a little bit more comfortable than it actually was, but it would have been a space. And if you were harboring people overnight, it would have made the most sense, right? Who's going to come into your barn, in the middle of the night and check out your root cellar, especially if you're a justice of the peace? That is the lore. That is all the work that we've done up to this point to try to uncover this story. And I admittedly was the most skeptic 7 years ago. I was the most skeptic about this because at that time I was serving on the Connecticut Freedom Trail, and I had looked at almost 166 sites like this, 168 cities and towns. And almost every town in the state of Connecticut has a site dedicated to this stuff, and Southington doesn't. So when this first came out, I was very skeptic, and it's taken me 7 years and a lot of history. But I think we're finally there. We can definitively say this man was an abolitionist. We can definitively say he was a leader in abolitionist sentiments in our community. So what's next? How do we finalize this thing? So what's next is that all of the wonderful town committees that I showed you at the beginning here, Open Space, members of this council, and the Barnes Museum, and the Southington Historical Society, we're all working together right now to try to recognize the site with signage and access. We want people to be able to go there, read about it, know that this history happened. The second step will hopefully be doing archaeology at the site. If we can see that maybe at the bottom of that root cellar there are objects under that earth. I'll tell you right now, at the Barnes Museum, We did ground penetrating radar last fall before we built our new parking lot, which is gorgeous, thank you. We did ground penetrating radar, and we found a 20-foot long by 10-foot wide structure, 9.5 feet underground. And it turns out it's an 1820s clock shop. That's a whole other presentation. But I'm just saying that because you can find history still today underground. There are things there to discover. And let's say if we do archaeology at the root cellar, that we uncover an object from 1840 to 1830, a household good item that really would only be there if somebody occupied the space. That's more proof in our narrative that this was an occupied space at one point, right? So archaeology to determine if there's any artifacts to corroborate the occupation or artifacts from the period. And then third, I'm working really hard to get state recognition for this site. Again, either through the Connecticut Freedom Trail or through the State Register of Historic Places. This doesn't do anything other than say to the public and mark it down in history beyond all of our times on this plane that this was a site of significance. And it's been long overdue for our town to have something like this. I think it definitely is possible. And again, I just want to thank especially Councilwoman Clock, Mr. Tuplinsky, Mr. Palmieri for working with me on this over the years. It's really been such a pleasure, and I can't wait to continue working on it. It's truly been the core of what I do. I hate to think that we live this life just to be forgotten. And now Peter Tusco, Mr. Curtis, and what he did, even though we have to unravel it backwards and it's really hard, they're not going to be forgotten. So, thank you. That's it. That was short.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
See? Thank you.
Does anybody have questions for Christina?
I just
Take
have
an
a
extra,
comment.
we could take an extra 5 minutes, yeah?
I just have a comment. Excellent history.
Thank
I don't know
you.
any of this. I didn't know any of this. I mean, other than from what Ms. Clock tells us, or Paul, even Chris mentioned it a few times, but this is amazing.
Thank you.
Great work.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Just a compliment as well. Your passion is contagious. It's great, especially in your role at the Barnes Museum, bringing that history to life. It's really infectious to see your passion and enthusiasm for it. So I want to thank you for bringing Southington's history to life.
Thank you, Chris.
And I know Councilwoman Clock has been instrumental in working alongside you for quite some time on this, so is there any additional insights that you'd like to share?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
This project, 7 years, has been a long journey. And when the adjacent property was being developed, I recall my discussion/suggestion proposal request, and Mark Lovely generously committed to honoring and memorializing the site and the families. And I could not be any prouder of this project, kicking this off, and here we are today. And most importantly, the impact that your research and Phil, all that you have done,
Thank you.
that they will not be forgotten. And additionally, it proves that Southington has always been the city of progress. And this is it right here. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. The history of Peter Tusco and Philo Barnes and Carlos Curtis, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing, as Chris said, that your passion is evident in everything that you do, and especially on this topic. We thank you for putting this together and presenting this so passionately. Hopefully, we've also memorialized this in the video, and people will be able to see this and go through your slides on their own time as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you. It would be great if you could also consider maybe putting it on your website. Maybe a
Can do.
link to the minutes or something like that on your website.
Can do.
Thank you for
so
coming
much.
out tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank
To
you.
mention, we always get excited when we hear archaeology because there's a chance that Indiana Jones
Yeah.
may show up with his satchel. And
You never know. Not at this scale, but if we
belongs
find
in a
anything big,
museum.
yeah,
good
it
stuff.
happens.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina. Okay. We will move on. That was a wonderful presentation. Thanks again. We will move on to the councilperson communications. We'll open the floor up for anybody who wants to start. If it's okay, maybe what I'll do, if it's all right, maybe I'll start as Jack, and then I'll let you go. I wanted to have a follow-up to the last meeting. You weren't here when the firefighters came. I wanted to maybe start us off with a quick statement of a follow-up to the work that we had done. Chris and I has had some follow-up, and, we have been advised that, we shouldn't be making public comments about the negotiations that are going on with the fire department, but, we were, as a follow-up to the last meeting, Chris and I had a connection that we wanted to share with everybody, and we wanted to just make a public statement on that. So if it's okay, what I've done is I've written a public statement that has been reviewed by the fire chief. It's been reviewed by the chair of the fire commission, also the town manager, and the labor attorney, to ensure that the statement that we're going to make is appropriate. So I'm going to just read a quick statement, and it says, as a follow-up to the last council meeting where a number of firefighters came out to express concern about staffing, I'd like to update you that in the day or two following, I contacted Minority Leader Chris Palmieri, and we convened a meeting with the town manager and the fire chief to look at ways to address these concerns during the arbitration process. While opinions may differ on the topic, at this meeting we discussed the issue in depth and brainstormed various ideas. The fire chief agreed to do further to further discuss the matter with the fire commission chair, which he did, and he pledged to do his utmost to monitor and address the issues to the greatest extent possible during the arbitration process. Of course, following the outcomes of arbitration, the fire commission and fire chief will reevaluate and take further actions as appropriate. As always, we will continue to work collaboratively with all stakeholders to address any challenges and continue to uphold the highest standards of safety for our emergency responders that meet the needs of our community. So, I wanted to thank Chris and also the town manager and the fire chief for being open-minded and having the discussion, and also for the follow-up that they did on that. So with that, I also want to be sure that we limit discussion on that topic beyond that, since that was reviewed. I'm going to put that in the record, Madam Clerk, for you to put there. Okay, thank you, Jack. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So, yeah, last council meeting was my first meeting that I've missed, and I watched the meeting, and there was obviously a lot of attendees to that meeting. I listened to everyone. I want them all to know that I heard their concerns. As a council person, I will do everything to obviously put Southington's safety first. Some of it is a little upsetting to hear come from some of their family members, especially. It's family's important, and when you hear their loved ones up there, almost in tears, it definitely hits home for me. As the council spoke before, we did do a survey, and I would love for an update on a path forward of what our action is going to be on that survey. I get it that we can't do things overnight, but we spent $80,000 on a survey, and as a council person, I can say that I have not heard much more of that. And I think that's alarming that, we spent that amount of money and we're not having these conversations.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councilperson Communications?
I just want to,
Councilman Paul Marai.
yeah, and thank you for the statement. Obviously, I'm representing my caucus, I know you're representing your caucus, and it was really important that we had that meeting with the manager and the chief. Again, we're not interfering with any ongoing negotiations, but just make sure that the residents know we heard the concerns and we're trying to take action to address them. So I think that's important, and appreciate you doing that.
Yep, and thanks for also joining in.
Oh, of course. I have a couple other things. Is it okay
Please.
to go now? First of all, just want to make the community aware. I'm not sure how aware members of the community are, but especially parents. And it's been on the news, but I just want to make sure that our residents are aware. There are now THC-infused drinks that can be sold at package stores, and these are not age-restricted, really due to a loophole in the language because of the way they the way the packaging is done, in that the seltzers contain 5 milligrams of THC, but because they're labeled as containing 5 servings, it doesn't quite meet the state regulations. So as part of steps, we're working on this. I've also reached out to Representative Poulos, and he's going to see what he can do at the state level for us, because it really is kind of a loophole, but Again, just want to make sure that especially parents are aware, there are these THC-infused drinks that could be sold to some of our youth. So that's really concerning.
Chris, do you have that flyer? Can we
Yeah,
put
I
that in
can
the
have
minutes?
that.
I
Yep.
think that'd be good for those
Yep,
who are
that's
seeing
great.
this.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Is it okay, Chris?
Sure,
Can you- yeah.
Sure.
So is it just package stores or is it convenience stores?
No, it's not age
You had said
restricted.
package stores.
Right.
I'm like, you can't get into a package
No,
store.
no,
Not
no.
18.
They're not, it's not age restricted.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So, again, you know, and there's THC versus
Yep.
marijuana, cannabis, you know, the language and the terminology makes it a little challenging as well. I had the pleasure last Saturday, along with council members Clark and Del Santo, to attend the event at the Southington Public Library with our junior governor, or kid governor, Cristiano Almeida. Also want to thank Representative Poulos and Representative Cooley for attending along with the Lieutenant Governor. So it was great to see so many kids come out for a wonderful event. We missed our memo to come in superhero theme. So next time we'll know.
A superhero in any.
But it really was a great event. Some updates from STEPS. We had our monthly meeting. I think many people in the community and certainly in the council are aware, every 2 years we give a survey to students in 7th grade, 9th grade, and 11th grade. That's specific for Southington to gauge our progress towards reducing risky behaviors for our youth. Those were administered at SHS, Karen Smith Academy, and at both middle schools last week. The survey, again, is administered every 2 years since 2010. So hopefully we use those results and help guide us in the direction specific for the Southington community moving forward. The Youth Council of STEPS hosted a story time at Southington Public Library this past Saturday with 10 students and adults participating. They read Busy Betty by Reese Witherspoon and did a craft inspired by the book. So that's great that our youth are getting involved with our younger generation. The STEPS website, if you haven't seen it, check it out. There's now a new interactive quiz to the website, and it's about the Connecticut Social Host Law. So it was created by the coalition last year and is now joined by a quiz developed completely by the youth council members. And it's amazing what our youth council members are able to do. In fact, they drafted a letter to Representative Poulos about their concerns about the THC-infused beverages that I shared with you a moment ago. And finally, vaping continues to be a main issue with our youth. So Megan Albanese from STEPS is continuing her intervention program. She travels to the schools and offers a little history and education on the dangers and risks of vaping. So all good things from STEPS in our community. And the last one, unfortunately, I'd be remiss if I didn't share some concerns. I know, Paul, you were there as well. I attended the Board of Ed meeting this past Thursday, right here, where they had a special meeting to adopt the budget. The reason I'm concerned is because the budget, the Board of Ed ultimately did reduce the budget. It is still a higher percentage increase than we're used to. But I want to review a little bit of history, and reviewing the minutes, it really comes to light. So I'm going back to the budget meeting from May 10th, 2021. That was during the COVID era. In fact, that was still a remote meeting. And at that time, Councilman Poulos was here, myself and Councilwoman DiPaolo had some concerns because it was mentioned at that meeting about using some of the ESSER funds, the COVID funds, to fund an operational portion of the Board of Education budget. So again, I pulled from the minutes here, and there was discussion back and forth about how much money was going to be adopted for the Board of Ed budget. And from the minutes, Mr. Del Santo noted the educational side and the town side received federal funding this past year, just a reminder. And if you remember, that was when we were talking about using some of that funds to offset the operational costs. So then I stated it's important to remember it cannot supplement operational funds. It is for one-time expenditures. That's huge, and it's important for people to understand. Mr. Del Santo said it's a great point, but it's the same for the town side. So again, thinking back now, we know that the ESSER funds that we used on the general government side were for one-time, capital improvements versus supplementing operational funds on the Board of Ed side. So that's the first concern. That meeting went on. Mr. Lombardi stated the only reason he can go along with the cut is because of the understanding of the approximately $6 million the school board should be receiving in federal relief. And then Mr. Poulos voiced his opposition too. So that was in 2021. Again, that was the first sign of using COVID funds, which my concern at the time, and still is that it's a non-recurring source of revenue to fund operations in our town. The next year, 2022, I again stated concerns that the Board of Ed budget was reduced by $500,000. That included no new personnel, no new projects, no new programs, and no new equipment. Paul, at the time, you stated that the chair of the Board of Finance recommended approving, as recommended from the Board of Finance, the adoption of the Board of Education budget. I, at that time, suggested we look at all our budgets to find maybe funds to offset if we needed to add money back into the Board of Ed budget because of those concerns. That budget passed. Jack was with us at that time. We stated concerns about that budget. Last year's budget, and this one in particular, I stated concerns, I'm taking this right from our council minutes, about using what's called the non-lapsing account. The non-lapsing account, for members of the public that aren't aware, those are funds that aren't expended from the previous fiscal year. So again, in the past, we've used those for, and again, on the town side, we do this, we fund one-time expenses that are capital improvements. We do not supplement the operational budget because it's not a steady, reliable source of income year after year. Unfortunately, that was used last year. So now, as a result of the Board of Education adopting the budget on Thursday, I reached out to the business manager, Jennifer Mellett, and asked her for a couple facts to share with everyone. So the first thing I asked is what amount of the 23-24 budget, the budget we're currently in, was funded from the non-lapsing account for the Board of Education? The answer, I think we all remember, $760,456 was reallocated. So again, my concern last year was I said at the time it's creating a fiscal cliff. Others have referred to it as a hole, but it's funds that aren't recurring year after year. So then my next question, what amount is budgeted from the non-lapsing account for the 24-25 budget? I think we all know the answer is zero. So already it's negative $750,000 to start this year's Board of Education operating budget. I then went on to ask, okay, how much of the ARP ESSER fund was used to fund operational expenses? And it is in the budget, and she teased it out for me. So $535,719 is a true reduction of the operating budget with ARP ESSER funds from last year. So then I asked what amount of the ARP ESSER funds is used for the 24-25 budget moving forward. The answer again is zero. So, and again, Paul, I know you were there, listening to the conversation the other night and hearing the tough decisions they were making, it's important for the public to realize that they were starting really with negative $1.25 million between the 760 plus for the non-lapsing account and the $500,000 from the ARP ESSER funds. It really is important to know that they were both at zero for this year moving forward. So as we enter the budget cycle, I again felt it was really important to look back at what's happened leading up to last Thursday night, and ultimately it will come to us moving forward, but just want to share those concerns.
Thank you, Chris. And just for clarification, the town council does not decide how the funds are used. That's a Board of Education decision with the superintendent. And I do believe the ARP ESSER funds, I think we're talking, if I recall, it's 4 or 5 positions that they decided to take out of the budget years ago. So they decided to remove those positions from the budget and fund them with ARP ESSER a few years ago. And now for this year, they want to move those positions back into the budget. So when the 535, I think you're referring to, that is, it's a strategic decision that they as a team decided to do early in the COVID process, and knowing that when they got to the end of the funds, that they were going to have to make a decision whether to keep those positions or get rid of those positions. And obviously, they decided that they wanted to keep those positions and move them into this budget as part of their proposal. So that was just a clarification on those funds.
And so in the budget, which I think we all have, so pages 65 to 69, I think, it does outline exactly what the ARP ESSER funds did fund.
Yep.
And it's a lot more than the 535,000 that
course.
I mentioned.
Yeah,
So the
535 was a piece of it.
Right, and the reason I'm saying that is because I asked specifically what of the ARP ESSER funds was used to supplement last year's operational budget versus
Yeah,
this year's.
I understand.
That's-
I was clarifying that 535 was a conscious decision some time ago to remove those. Those were employees who were on the roll that they decided to fund with ARP ESSER, and now they're moving them back in. The 535, that was the situation there. So I just wanted to clarify for those who may not be as familiar on that. Okay, any other topics, Chris?
No, that's it.
Anybody else on councilperson communications?
I've got a comment to make on Councillor
Okay.
Palmieri's thing, which is, what do we expect? Do we expect that, you give 3 years of funding, right, to do remedial stuff, and some of it is obviously, gets bled into everything else. But they had 4 positions that they, the Board of Education, the superintendent, whoever, made that decision, was to fund them out of those funds, and then to keep them, and then to keep them going for the next budget year. If that's the decision they want, that's nothing to do with the ESSER funds. That's to do with their decision to keep funding things that ESSER made possible. And they're doing that with other things too, such as the mental health professionals. And the question for us is, do we, it's not a question of, funding at this point. The question for us is, do we fund those positions going forward, knowing that they were funded with temporary funds? That's it.
So even taking the ESSER funds out, because that's a little bit more complicated, just because, like I said, there's 4 pages in the budget book, it's a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
The one that's pretty transparent to me was using the non-lapsing account last year. We sat here, I know you and Jen were not here, but we sat here, and the chair of the Board of Finance even made a comment that it's not creating a fiscal cliff, and again, I've heard it referred
Okay,
to as a
but
hole or a
I mean,
cliff.
we've talked about that topic ad nauseum, Chris, many times. What I would just say is this: this board does not decide
I
how those
understand.
funds. We decide on a total budget for Board of Ed and a total budget for town government. How that gets, divided, parsed into the accounts. Those are for the respective boards to determine. We do obviously have line item on the government side. I would just ask that it's completely understood, Chris. Your point is made. We had the same discussion at the last budget cycle and also during the political season. I respect your position on it. I would suggest that, Tony, I would suggest we move on this one. It's clear,
I've made
the
my
point that's made. Yeah.
I've made my point.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Councilmatic communications?
I'd just like to mention that I had the pleasure to go to the first, for myself, police ball Saturday, and it was quite an event. I have to say that it was nice to see the fire department also represent with the police department, and I can tell you that I was there as an EMS representative. I had a stint on the ambulance for several years back in the past. It was a very civilized, very nice, fun function.
Good. Thank you, Vice Chair. I'll echo your sentiments on the police ball. I know myself, Jim, Mike, Jen attended the policeman's ball. It was, I would say, it was nice to have an opportunity to see everybody in a more personal setting. We all interact on a regular day, maybe in what I would say is a business environment. Oftentimes, we are either in a meeting together, a subcommittee meeting together. We bump into each other in the community while maybe an officer is working or a firefighter is working, and it was an opportunity to just set all of the formalities aside and get to know people a little bit more on a personal level. And that was really nice. It was nice to talk about families. It was nice to talk about where people are going on vacation, what are they doing, and learn a little bit more about their personal lives and the people that they are day in and day out that we see dedicating towards our public safety professionals in our community. We appreciate our police officers, we appreciate our firefighters, and all of our emergency responders, and it was wonderful to attend that. Congratulations to all those who put it on. They had a wonderful guest speaker as well. Hopefully, they'll be able to invite that gentleman to also speak at other events. I know I personally am looking to see if there's an opportunity for him as well. It was very motivational. We have here tonight our Housing Authority Director, Kevin Meyer. He's going to be talking to us a little bit later under the Town Manager's Report, but I wanted to say thank you while he was here for the coffee chat that we had. It was nice to get to know each other also late last week. It was a pleasure to learn a little bit about Kevin's history, about his upbringing here in town, that he played ball also, and his journey with the Housing Authority recently and where he wants to focus for the future. So thank you, Kevin, for the time that you made to introduce yourself and meet with me. I had a discussion with Jeremy DeCarli, our town planner, Director of Planning.
Director of Community Development.
Community Development, my apologies. Had a great discussion, a follow-up discussion on an initiative he's working on that I just wanted to also let folks know about. Jeremy is working on leveraging digital technology for inspections in town, primarily starting with re-inspections. And I'm really happy to say that he and the team that's involved with doing inspections are so open-minded to put together a new process to help promote the use of digital technology such as pictures and videos. They're going to put a policy together, they're going to post it on the website, and they're going to encourage people, residents, business owners, and the like to use digital technology to help better document the process, but also to hopefully streamline the process for everybody. So more to come on that. And as Chris said, I just wanted to point out that the budget was discussed. It was passed, I think, 6.25%, Chris, 6.24 or 6.25, something like that. That has to still go to the Board of Finance. As always, we encourage everybody in the community to attend the Board of Finance workshops. Also, the town councilors here to attend the Board of Finance workshops. Listen some of the points that Chris brought up. Listen to those, understand those, study those, know what the impacts are all around, and be prepared to speak your mind either way on the budget. And for those of us up here, be prepared to have a good discussion when it comes to the council as well. So thank you, Chris, for bringing that up. Okay, anybody else on councilperson communications? If not, we're going to move on to reports of special committees. Item A, self-insurance. Tony.
Yeah, it's me. Okay, a meeting we had, just one topic really, which is I expected expenses for the self-insurance was 28.9 at the beginning of this year. It's now ticked up a bit because we've had a couple of months of greater than $2 million worth of claims, and now the projection is 29.65 million, which is a little bit more than we thought. There's still a few months to go, so we're not going to do anything at the moment, but we're going to start looking at it kind of seriously next month in terms of do we make any changes to whether we use reserves or whether we do anything to the actual payments that people will have to make. So we'll start looking at that next month, and I think we have to make a decision, a real decision on what it means for next year by March. So it's in time for the budget. So that's it for self-insurance.
Thank you. Nope. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Councilman Morrison, anybody have questions? No? Complex topic. We know self-insurance is always one that ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. Right now it's up, and those fees get adjusted on an annual basis. So we'll look to adjust as we go towards the end of the cycle. Item B, open space. Commissioner Clark. Councilperson Clark,
Yes.
sorry.
Thank you. So the theme is grants, grants, and more grants. So we have a few opportunities First, leaf irrigation system. So Eversource is currently doing some work on their easement, and then once that's done, they will proceed with the irrigation system in that area. Second, a trails grant that is through DEEP, looking into possible trail extension from the Curtis Open Space. And third, a grant to construct a barn, which is part of the Pleasant View Open Space Master Site Plan. And that could house some animals from the high school ag sci programs and some other items. Did I forget anything?
I don't think so. Yeah.
And possible farm heritage tour in May. We will set a date, and once I have that date, I will report it.
Wonderful. Any questions for Councilwoman Clark? Okay, item C, Public Works.
Thank
Councilman
you,
Del
Mr. Chair.
Santo.
Thank you. We had our meeting on Wednesday, the 7th. Some of the items that were of importance, well, they're all very important, but some of that I want to discuss are the bulky waste transfer station. 2024 permits are now available at the Highway and Parks Department during working hours. They, folks can also get their permits by mail. All the information's on the website. There will be a couple of Saturdays, probably in April, where they can actually get their permits on Saturday morning at the Highway Department. General maintenance, the weather's been cooperative till tomorrow, tonight into tomorrow maybe. We're supposed to get a little bit of snow, or a lot of bit of snow, who knows? A lot of snow. Who knows? Depends on which hour you check. But in the meantime, our folks at the Public Works Department are out cleaning outfalls, painting doors and awnings at the town hall. They're keeping busy. I had brought up that a lot of catch basins in town are being blocked by either some leaves left over from the fall or garbage. So Public Works is on it, but I think all of us could, if we happen to be on a walk or something and see a catch basin is blocked, might be a good idea to take your foot or shoe and move some of that stuff aside so water can continue to flow down into the catch basins. Just an observation. We did settle on the pavement treatments going forward. We all of us agreed to use the Cape Seal. So more to follow on that. We're hoping that it's going to be a nice alternative with a little better price tag than what we've done in the past. So as I said, more to follow on that. Some of the engineering comments that were brought up is that the trail from Lazy Lane to Aircraft Road is under works right now. If you look past BJ's, you could look up towards into Plainville. They're working on it, and we're all very excited to get that up and running. So the trail is going to be extended eventually. It's going to be finished, and all of us are very excited to continue on that. Plantsville safety improvements. We know we had some activity there this past weekend, but they're 15% complete. They're on hold right now until the weather gets a little bit better. Excuse me, they're set to continue in April 2024. I had noticed that there were some no parking signs left up from when they were doing the sidewalks, so the chief was going to look into it and take those down so folks can park there until construction starts back up again. We did have some folks that came out to our meeting. It was actually the busiest Public Works meeting I've been involved in the past 5 years. There were some concerns about some flooding in certain areas in town, and I assured all people that came that we were going to leave the application on the agenda till our next meeting. In the meantime, we're working with the town engineer and the town manager, and Mr. Chair is helping out as well to try to mitigate some of these concerns about flooding in town, making sure that the town's doing all they can for their part to help some of these neighbors in the area. A constituent contacted me, was interested in donating some money. He saw an article in the newspaper about defibrillators, AEDs in the parks. So we discussed that at our meeting, discussed it with the town manager and Mr. Chair. We're trying to look into the best way to do this at the town parks. Apparently this person was at 2 events where AEDs were not available, and one of them ended up in death. So he was pretty concerned. He saw the article, and this person wants to remain anonymous, but wants to donate some money towards him. So we're going to take it a step further, and we're just trying to figure out the logistics of the safest way to do it, where these AEDs are not going to be vandalized or, I don't know, stolen. I mean, obviously they'd probably sell them on the black market or something, but it must be worth. They're expensive. So we're trying to figure out a way where it's as safe as possible, and we may have to involve the police. So more to follow on that. Hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll be able to take care of that. But it just, once again, people in this community are so great. They see something in the newspaper, and they're offering to open their wallets and donate because they care about it so much. And then later on tonight, I see Mrs. Turnquist here in the audience. We're going to be speaking about community services roof repair. So I can let the town manager talk about that when his time comes. I think I covered most of it. Jack, did I miss anything? I know we went pretty late.
Yeah, I had to leave early.
Yep.
There was a lot of speakers,
Yep.
and I think it's definitely something that, we have to look into some of those concerns that they brought up, because nobody wants their house flooding. And if the town could do a little bit to help alleviate some of that, I think it's a good thing to do.
Right, thank you.
Mike, I did just, want to also comment. You glazed over a little bit about cap seal and mill pave.
Yeah, Cape Sale.
And,
Yep.
again, we, in an effort to get more acreage covered, basically, we decided to do this secondary process, which is almost as good as what we're going to do. I want people to understand that it's a compromise, but it's a very good compromise. So there were other alternatives that could have given us more roads for our dollar, but the result wouldn't have been as good. So it bears investigating, but basically, the ultimate is to mill the road and pave the road, and the secondary Cape Seal is a minor mill and a bonding.
Good point, Jeff, thanks. Sure.
And that's a great segue into the next meeting when we will be talking more about roads and funding roads for the future.
Right.
And thank you, Councilman Del Santo. AEDs are near and dear to my heart. I think it's the more we can get of those everywhere in the community, in many different buildings, the better chance we have to save lives. They are now designed so that anybody can use them. They're self-explanatory. They talk you through how to use them. There's an opportunity to save a life. That's wonderful. So thank you for working on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions on that? No. Item D, Library Building Committee. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Because of the length of the Public Works meeting, I was unable to be early for the Library Building Committee meeting, where they did a site tour and an update on construction in person. So I did want to mention that Kevin Volpacella, who's the site superintendent, offered to take myself and the chair on a VIP tour last Friday. And it's very impressive to see the work that's been done there, and how organized and on the game they are. As far as the update for the library, we are basically on schedule. Well, we did hear that it slipped maybe a couple of weeks from November to December, but there are ways that we think we might be able to pull that back into November. Because the weather's been cooperative, the footings are dug for the addition. They're prepped, and we will be pouring this month, and I think steel was scheduled for the end of March. So weather permitting, which like tomorrow's not going to cooperate, but in general, we've been in good shape. So we're basically on schedule. We're refining our budget. We're close to, I would say, the end of that discussion, and things look great. So again, thanks to Kevin and also Christine Longo, the manager there, for a special VIP tour. It's very impressive, and it's coming along very nicely.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thanks for your leadership on that. Really appreciate the professionalism that's exhibited by Whiting Turner and the rest of the crew that's working on that. And thank you, Mark, for sitting on that with the rest of the staff that are
I was
helping.
just wondering, my tour wasn't VIP. I just wondered what was different between my tour and your tour.
I don't know. I wondered how we got classified as VIP. I don't know.
They said you didn't need a hard hat.
I was on the normal tour. I didn't get the VIP tour.
Next month,
Yeah,
the
no
town
hard hat,
manager
there's
gets on the
nothing to
VIP
protect the
tour.
town manager.
Okay, any questions for the Vice
Free
Chair?
sandwiches.
I know. No questions on Library Building Committee? Okay. Item E, Sewer.
Yeah, thanks, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
Councilman Morrison.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. First is, I think we're all aware of the flooding that went on in town. Did a number on the sewers as well. The plant flows were twice what we expect for a period of time. Essentially during the both the snow melt and the amount of rain we got. And we had to bypass some of the flow through the sewer system by about 7.5 million gallons were bypassed out of the system directly into the Quinnipiac. The good news is that was done just before we got to the nitrogen facility. The nitrogen phosphorus wasn't taken out, but everything else was cleaned. So you have to tell DEEP this, and they take it into account. Every sewer system in Connecticut did that. We were lucky in the sense that we can do it after it goes through most of the cleaning processes. Some towns did it just before it even got to any cleaning. So, secondly, the issue I brought up last time in terms of the uncollected sewer rates, it wasn't as much as was thought a month ago. It's about 1.1 million overall, which is the actual sewer rates that weren't paid, the interest on that, and also liens that have been put on people's houses to get a repayment. In order to fix this, staff has come up with a way of doing it that will essentially be a management process. And it's a way in which we can do it, in which there won't be any extra expenses added, there won't be anybody hired to do this stuff. We can do it with the existing resources, and it can be done relatively quickly too. They're working through everything as we speak. It involves working with banks. It involves essentially selling off debt too for our benefit. But those will be that process will be put in place over the next month or so, and it doesn't need to be essentially blessed by the sewer committee or even the town council. But obviously, we'll present it to the town council because it takes care of a problem, and I think it's an excellent solution. Okay.
Any questions for Councilman Morrison? Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Item F, Technology Ad Hoc Subcommittee. Councilwoman Clark.
Thank you, Chair. So we have met with all departments. I just want to thank everybody who met with us. And one thing is clear, we are very lucky to have such dedicated town staff working here. Everyone has been great. We've discussed, we met last Friday. We discussed some key takeaways and preliminary priorities. And we will have some follow-up meetings, and we will have one more meeting to finalize everything, and we will have final information by our next meeting, the end of February. That is all.
And from our informal discussions, it sounds like you're going to have a healthy list of suggestions.
Yes. we
Excellent.
will.
All right. That was the hope. Hey, it's opportunities. Any questions for Councilwoman Clark on the technology side? Okay. If not, we're going to move on to item 6, Town Manager's Report. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item I have is a request from the Fire Commission and the Fire Chief. You may recall that there was something on your list that we had that we took off for approximately $45,000, which was the decontamination unit that they used to decontaminate the
PPE,
uniforms. To make sure that it's safe for the town employees. That being said, per the letter, they're asking for permission to apply for a $48,000 grant. The amount of $43,000 would come from the grant. The other is $4,300, which is currently in the fire department budget. Happy to answer any questions on that.
Any questions for the Town Manager on the PPE washer? If not,
Second item I have, Mr. Chairman, some of you will remember, although it was Kevin's two predecessors ago from Kevin, they applied for a small cities grant with the town council, and the work was done for the 500 Pleasant Street complex. At that time, they did, I believe, new kitchens, et cetera. We went through the process. So this is the second time around, and Kevin's going to put a presentation on for us.
So thank you, Council, for inviting me, and special thank you to Mark. And Mike Early is also here. He's our chair of the Southington Housing Authority. Really here for two reasons. One is And again, thank you for advocating for us for the grant. What we would like to do is get a small cities grant for one of our complexes. We have 4 complexes. I'll run through a brief PowerPoint deck that I created here. Give you a little background of Southington Housing Authority. My name is Kevin Meyer. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Authority. As Chairman Chaplinsky mentioned earlier, I grew up in the town of Southington, went to the schools here all the way up through the high school, then left for a little while to go to college and played a little professional baseball. And then after that, I worked at ESPN for almost 30 years in a leadership role there, in a 24-hour day, 7-day a week environment.
Would you mind, Kevin, just take the microphone? You're
Yes,
a little
sir.
taller than, thank you.
Yep. I'll lean in a little bit.
Because we're recording it. Thank you.
Okay. So hopefully everybody heard me about myself a little bit, but I want to make sure this isn't about me or myself. This is really about the people that I work with and how great they are and how proud I am of them. Again, I started a little over a year ago at the Housing Authority, coming from ESPN, and at the time, we have a small group that we work with, or that I work with. Here's a brief organizational structure. There is a 5-member board of the Housing Authority, and there are 5 employees that work with me, under me. And it's a really interesting crew that we have. Two of my team is, they've been in the Housing Authority for many, many years. They're retired, so they do work part-time. They're in their mid-70s. They have a ton of experience. Also have 2 young employees that recently out of college. So it's a really good dynamic. My maintenance foreman, he's been there for 32 years. Unfortunately, he's retiring in May, so we're going to have to look for another foreman of our maintenance team. It's going to be some big shoes to fill. He's been tremendous. He's done a great job. They have taught me more than I've taught them so far in the short time that I've been there. It's been a great experience for me. So the Housing Authority was created in 1948. And what we do is we administer to low income and elderly people in the town of Southington. That's the originally reason it was created, to administer affordable, decent, and safe housing solutions. As I'd mentioned, the board, I won't read all through these, but I'll briefly touch on each one. Since I've been here over the last year and a half, one of my favorite parts of what I have been doing is collaborating with leaders in the town and building relationships with many of our community partners, Bread for Life, Community Services, Calendar House. We do a lot with them, trying to provide services for our elderly and allow them the ability to live the life that they want to live, providing them and allowing them to live by themselves, so without help from others. That's our sole objective. We have oversight of 4 complexes in the town, over 180 units with over 200 tenants. The 4 complexes are 6 Carter Lane, which is what we're going to be looking for the grant for, which is our oldest property. It was established in 1968. There's 408 Main Street, established in 1974. 500 Pleasant, which Town Manager Schoda mentioned recently. They were done in 2 phases, 1978 and 1980. And 43 Academy Street, which was established in 1984, which is our newest complex, right across from Town Hall, right in back of the Congregational Church in downtown. Some of the goals and objectives that I wanted to put in place when I started in late 2022. What I wanted to do is bring the authority compliant with CHFA requirements. CHFA is the Connecticut Housing Financial Authority, which essentially we report to. We report up through, and I wanted to become compliant with all the requirements and maintain a fiscally sound agency. I wanted to improve internal and external communication with our town community partners, enhance and foster those relationships, review and update all our housing authority policies and guidelines and procedures to become compliant with the industry best practices, and provide leadership, set expectations, and provide an improved working environment for our employees. Looking at 2024 and beyond, would like to procure grant money to rehabilitate and modernize the quality of our current properties, starting with Carter Lane. Would also like to improve the quality of living for each of our tenants by listening, getting their feedback, and prioritizing their needs. Explore the feasibility of expanding the supply of affordable housing in town under the SHA umbrella of properties, which is something that, for me, would be a long-term goal in working with the council and other members of the community, and to provide services to the elderly and disabled that allow them to remain in their independent living environment for as long as humanly possible. Some of the community engagement that we do work with and collaborate with is, I mentioned, Bread for Life, Southern Community Services, and the Calendar House Senior Center. Over the past year, some of the things that we have done, we have provided some holiday dinners around Thanksgiving and Christmas, working with the Bread for Life and the Community Services. We collaborated with Calendar House for entitlement programs, which is renters rebate and energy assistance. Anybody, typically low income, which fall into our group, can apply for both of those renters rebates and energy assistance. The community services, we collaborate with them for Coat and Hats Drive. They provided, this year they came out, it was great. They provided free coats, hats, gloves for any of our tenants or residents. It was really just a shopping. Essentially, they come down to our community centers and they basically shop for free coats and hats. Every year they do the holiday gift baskets, and we do a monthly lunch, learn, and bingo with the community services. So what that is, we'll purchase some food, and then we'll provide them with something pertinent, informational, or some kind of services that will enhance their living and in their lives. And also Bread for Life, they provide regular meals, and they deliver them to our tenants in need weekly. Some of the outreach programs, the Village Green preschool children. One of the agreements that we have with Village Green is if there is ever an emergency evacuation, they can use our community center up at 43 Academy Street. And actually, there was a point this year where something happened at the community or at the Village Green Nursery School, and they had to evacuate and use our community center, or our community hall. So that was, we were appreciative, and they were appreciative that was put into place. The VIF program, I'm sure you're probably aware of the VIF program with Dan Laporte and his team, the Special Needs Registry. We are collaborating with them. They're going to be coming out shortly to register all of our residents in that. And it's, again, we appreciate that. That's going to be a free service that they're providing to us and our tenants. The HAI group, they provided 15 volunteers at one point in the summer who came out, and we spent an entire day painting the exteriors of a bunch of our apartments. Had a good time, and again, we appreciate their volunteering. And Carta Health came out and they did free health screenings for all of our residents. Those are just some of the things, community outreach and collaborations that we've done just over the last year. And moving on to some, I won't read all of these, but achievements and accomplishments. We had applied for a grant for $65,000, and we were awarded that to fix some sidewalks in our parking lots. We conducted inspections for all of our apartments, all 180 of our apartments, to make sure that they were compliant. We met with the fire chief to conduct safety inspections for all of our community centers and public areas. And I made sure I provided opportunities for staff and our board commissioners to attend seminars, training, conferences for continued education in the housing authority policies and regulations. And again, work with local organizations to provide resources, information, social activities. And if you don't know, all of our properties have a community hall where the tenants can gather. and they can have informal, a lot of them will have little, they may do religious gatherings or what have you, but it's all for what they want to do in their area. So back to the community development block grant, which is the primary reason that I'm here. If you're not familiar with it, they call it a CDBG program. It is the Small Cities Program, and it provides funding and technical support for projects that achieve local community and economic development objectives, which benefits low and moderate income persons. Funding for the CDBG program is provided by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, and they award the funds directly to entitlement cities and towns in the state, which is why we have to go through the town for this one. We can't directly apply, the Housing Authority can't directly apply for this grant. It has to go through the town, and I appreciate Mark's collaboration with that. And the scope of work for the improvements and upgrades that I would like to use this grant for Carter Lane property will include, but not necessarily limited to, ADA upgrades for our, so we're ADA compliant, site work, building envelope upgrades, kitchen and bathroom upgrades, electrical upgrades, mechanical upgrades, and plumbing upgrades, which will ultimately add value to the Housing Authority portfolio at the end of the day. And just, this is just our contact information here. And I'd like to open up to any questions or thoughts or comments if anybody has any.
Any questions for Mr. Meyer?
Yeah. You mentioned 180 apartments. Is that your entire portfolio?
It is.
It is. Okay. And
Yep.
how many tenants do you have?
We have a little over 200.
200. Okay.
Some have, some of the units have doubles.
Okay. And how much would you be asking for the grant?
So we can apply for up to 2 million.
2 million. Okay.
Typically, you know, if it's everything, it'll end up being 1.7 for actual construction costs.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Yes, Councilman Palmieri.
So just to continue that line of questioning, you have 180 apartments, 200 tenants, you said. What is your demand for, or request for some elderly moving into these apartments?
Yeah, so right now we have a waiting list of 55 to 60 people. So if you are not familiar with how that works, it's income-based. You have to be 62 and older or disabled, and you essentially have to apply. And if you fit that criteria, then you go on the waiting list. And typically, when an opening happens or a vacancy happens, we go to the next person on the list. We'll give them a call and see if they're available. If they're not, we'll go down to the next person on the list.
Okay.
But we do have a 50, 60 person waiting list.
So with that waiting list, how long would you say on average people?
So that's a great question. That's the typical question that we get from anybody that wants to apply. I would say right now, we don't have any openings. So it could be up to a year.
Oh, okay. I was expecting you to say longer than
It could be longer. Frankly, when I started, we had quite a few openings, so it moved along a little bit in the beginning. But right now, as it's full, we tell people it could be, I would say, a minimum year
Okay,
on the wait list.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Mine's more of
Councilwoman
a
Clark.
comment. So for Rotary, every year we deliver lunches
Yes.
for the holidays.
I'm sorry, that should have been on
No,
there.
but what I want to say is, so I've been to several of the communities and met several residents, and I just want to thank you for actively going out and trying to find funds because this is a need. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll just say, for the record, for those who are watching, the Housing Authority, if it wasn't specifically mentioned, is a independent authority that's in the town of Southington. It is run. We do have a board that is appointed by the town council that I believe is state, there's a state legislation around that.
Under the state legislation, you're correct.
Exactly. And the funding is independent of the funding from our budget. So the Housing Authority manages their own budget. They have their own revenues. They have their own expenses. You know, they get revenues from grants like this, but also from the state, and it's supported by the state of Connecticut. Not necessarily the town of Southington from a budgeting perspective, but we, of course, work closely together to help each other where possible.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, taxes are not involved in that. We do, it's all based on our revenue and our expenses.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you for the presentation, and thanks for coming out and sharing a little history.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Kevin, can we please get your PowerPoint?
Yes. Sure.
Send it to Mark, and you can forward it along to us.
Yeah, I can do that.
We're going to put that into the meeting minutes.
Very good. All right, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. And we'll take action on that under old business.
Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Town Manager.
Mr. Chair, the next item I have is a recommendation for a repair, not a complete roof, a repair at Community Services. There was a leak, and you will see a recommendation from our Public Works Director, Millennium Builders, including the 10% contingency, $2,941.72. Any
Okay.
questions on that?
Any other questions?
And that concludes my report. There is no executive session tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Town Manager. I am happy to report that we're moving on to the Town Attorney's report, and Attorney Matney is here for the first time, sitting in for our Town Attorney. Attorney Matney is the Assistant Town's Attorney. Attorney Martaccio is unable to make today. So tell us about the long report that you've got today.
He left me an easy job today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Scott Matney, and I've been a resident for 6 years in the town. Before that, I've coached for 20 years in the town, and it's my privilege to be in this role and also to fill in for Attorney Martuccio today. But he gave me an easy job. There's nothing to report, which I suppose is good news for everybody.
Yes,
Could you
sounds like
just
there's a
talk little
question
bit
from
about
Councilman.
Tort law as referenced in, no, I'm joking.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Town Attorney.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Assistant Town Attorney. We're moving on to item 8, public communications. We will accept anybody who's a resident or employee of the town who wants to speak at public communications. Our town clerk will limit the time to 5 minutes per person. Please state your name and address for the record.
Dave Delory, 43 Riverside Drive. You may know that that's in the Sun Communities Mobile Home Park. Can I close this?
You may.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm
I'm sorry, what's the address?
43 Riverside Drive.
Thank you.
I want to start by saying that I appreciate, when I come down to these meetings, I have to remember that our problems are probably not one of the bigger ones that you face. So thank you for your service. There's just first of all, we've been watching the rail trail eagerly, so I know they're moving forward on that, and I appreciate that. A lot of our residents are going to be using it, hopefully. There are a couple things that have been going on over the past 18 months, say, that you probably aren't aware of, and I want to make sure the council's aware of it just for future reference. We're concerned that you not forget us. About 18 months ago, there was a resident whose property backs up to a property off of Captain Lewis Drive, where there was some extensive runoff, and the guy has put some pretty astonishing landscaping in that was finally what the runoff from some sort of construction project up there was washing away his landscaping. And I believe that the Sun finally did something about that. I don't know much more about that. Second thing, the Dewey pile. They're in the process of putting up their parking garage and an addition on the building. None of us knew about that. I understand that that's not a requirement of the zone, that there be a public hearing on it. But with so many of our residents that are right across the street, they're not happy about it. But life goes on. So then last year, about this time, behind VJ's, the gentleman who owns the property began a rock crushing operation of some kind of topsoil screening that I guess he did it without permits. Now, he went and got his permits, and I guess there's a bond that's been taken out, and that's been taken care of. And last week I noticed, because I live over there, somebody up on West Street started, or West Green Street, just clear cut a piece of property up there. So I called Economic Development, and Mr. Perillo was very kind and explained what was going on, and I guess this is going to be further discussed at your Economic Strike Committee coming up, which I will try to attend on. It's been moved to Wednesday.
Move to Wednesday.
Yeah, they're very nice and called me this afternoon. So I want to, that site up there, I know it because it comes down to our property line for my park. You may not know that the old canal runs right along the boundary of that property and the park. And it generates a lot of water that comes down the hill into the old canal. And that I know of, there's only 2 places where that water can exit the canal. And now, especially over the last year, we had so much rain, the people that back up to the canal have gone up there and looked and seen that water coming up into the canal. So whatever happens up there, that needs to be taken into consideration very strongly. And I watch the Quinnipiac River coming up in my backyard, and it comes up way faster the last couple of years than it used to. As a matter of fact, my backyard has been flooded a good part of the winter. And so I'm concerned about the people that are up by the canal, and I'm concerned about the runoff into the river. If you develop, 111 acre piece of land, that some of that runoff's going to inevitably end up into the canal and then eventually into the river. And I just want you to keep us in mind when that property is developed. You know, I'm open-minded on what they're doing over there. I'm going to come and listen, but I just want you to keep in mind. And I think I also would like to know if you would consider a change to the zoning regulations requiring hearings for, like I said, I don't know if it's commercial and industrial or just industrial, but when there's going to be notification for so many residents in our park that it potentially concerns. So that would have to be, I think, a zoning matter, but I'd just like you to consider it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Delory. Please state your name and address for the record.
Susan Zabahansky, 28 Working Street.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I was comfortably sitting in my bed watching this meeting, but I couldn't not come and speak about the budget. Chris, you prompted me out of my bed.
I can't believe I have that much power.
It's good to see you.
So I just have to say,
family
and this
show.
is in all seriousness, I mean, we're dealing with some financial difficulties in the town. We're hearing about the need for low-income housing. We're hearing about the need for more firefighters. We're hearing about need for more teachers. But you really need to consider the whole town. And I want everybody to stop this finger pointing. Talking about budgets that happened years ago. Let's work on this budget that's here now. We need to make cuts. Cuts have to be made because if we have an assessment coming up this year that's going to affect everyone in this town. People are struggling. I'm a single business owner, single income household, and I'm struggling. And I'm not struggling as much as some people. I worked at the dog pound today. I know how many dogs are coming in from Motel 6 because people are out of their homes. They're being displaced at Motel 6, and then we have to take in dogs from these families, and it's heart-wrenching for them to have to give up their pet. And that's just a little piece. I mean, community services, we provide so much food to keep dogs into their homes. So I see the struggle that's happening in the community. I think we need to open our eyes. Not all of us are sitting with 2 incomes in a house. There's people struggling. We're talking about our homeless students and the need to add mental health care workers. That's not the job of education. We can direct families to services outside of the school system to save money. What you were discussing, Councilman Palmieri, was positions that were added because of COVID, mental health crisis in the school system. They were supposed to be temporary. they ended, and now they're trying to add them back into the budget. So it's not, it was money that he knew was going to go away, the superintendent, and so the residents of this town have to be clear. We can't play these games, political games, finger pointing. We really need to buckle down. I appreciated some of the work that the Board of Education did in trying to, get the budget below the 9.8 the superintendent was originally asking for, but I think the work needs to be done at all levels of government because we have to keep the taxes low, because otherwise we're pushing more people out of their homes. It's just reality. You raise taxes, $200 for some people might be nothing, but that's grocery bill for someone for 2 weeks, for a elderly person. So I appreciate everyone buckling down. Let's stop the finger pointing and let's really buckle down and try and get this budget under control. I was disappointed to see, this is not going to be a popular opinion, but to see the firefighters out here, saying that the town's doing nothing, and then to hear council members saying, oh, safety's important. Yes, safety's important. We gave them 3 more full-time firefighters. It's a time when we need to look at every aspect of government, because we have a Board of Ed working on a $110 million budget and the rest of the town functioning on a very small budget compared to that. So the Board of Ed only services 6,000, a little over 6,000 people, and the rest of the town is 46,000 or so. So I think we really need to be diligent and not stop the finger pointing, and let's buckle down and see where we can make some cuts in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Regina, good evening. How are you?
A little slower.
Take your time.
First of all, it's Regina Coviello, 12 Beecher Street, and I do want to thank the emergency response team, because actually last Monday I had to use them. I'm okay now, and I was on crutches for a while, but I couldn't walk, and they were wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank God the granddaughter was home, the 16-year-old, because, I couldn't get out of a chair. So thanks to them. I do want to talk about the Board of Ed. I was at one of the Board of Ed meetings, and I found it hard to watch a couple sections where they had classes that a lot of kids couldn't get into, when it's 100 and something kids and they can't get in class. And I'm talking about important classes that we need these kids to learn this stuff for our future. My granddaughter is one of them. She couldn't get in this year. She's hoping to get in this following year. Forensic science, that's important. All right, we need forensic scientists in our future. When there's 100 and something kids that can't get in, that's alarming. Accounting 1, accounting 2, those are important. You have to have accountants. So I don't know if they have to reorganize how they do stuff at the Board of Ed in the school, but there's a lot of important classes that these kids can't get into, and we need those classes. So somehow they have to sit down, figure out, how to do that. Yeah, and you know what? I'm one of those people that is struggling dearly, okay? But I also don't want to take away from my granddaughter trying to get in a class that's important, okay? So if I have to give a little, then I'll do that, because it's important. I'm not saying all courses, okay? But these are important for our kids' future. We say we want them to be well-educated. We say we don't want them to just have to do nothing. Well, accounting, we know this. Accounting, no business can survive without accounting. Forensic science, all of this stuff, so maybe they have to sit down. Maybe there should be a team. I don't know. But, I'm waiting to see. My granddaughter's waiting to see if 2 years in a row she's not going to get in to those courses. So that's pretty much what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Good to see that you're okay and you had a good experience. Thank you for coming out.
You want to take one more comment?
If you can keep it under a minute, because you already came up and spoke, sure.
I can. There's a traffic controller going up. It would be the westbound side of West Queen Street. It's just a flashes your speed limit. So all of us are wondering, why is it not on the downhill side? Because we have 155 and older seniors entering that road right there at the bottom of that hill. And my neighbor across the street is almost 5 years now in litigation from an accident at that intersection. It's still not solved. And we've had the company make the sight lines better, but there should be a sign there too.
Thank you. Mr. Town Manager and our Public Works Chair, would you guys put that on your to-do? Thank you. Thank you for raising that. Appreciate that. Mike, you good? Thanks for coming out tonight. Mr. Urso, you all set? All right. Anybody else? Madam Chair, nobody? Everybody's good? All right, we're going to close public communications. Move on to old business. Item A, action on the AFG equipment grant request from our firefighters.
Motion to approve.
Oh, second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? And let's not forget, Bill, to take your phone off of mute. Any discussion? Okay, do we need a roll
No.
call on that, Mark?
No, we're supposed to.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
We went too fast on opposed. That's an aye, I assume.
That's, Bill, you're a supporter?
Yes.
Thank you, Bill. Just wanted to confirm. Motion passes 8-0. Action, item B, action on Southington Housing Authority Small Cities CDBG grant.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion
Oh, second as well?
and a second. Discussion on that?
Mr. Chair, I just want to say, 5 years on the council now, and it's the first presentation I've heard, I think. I don't remember anyone else coming from. It was wonderful. Excellent. Very nice.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Any other comments? Okay, okay for a roll, voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Bill. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 8-0. And item C, action on recommendations for community services roof repair.
Motion to approve, as mentioned by the town manager.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion there. That is for $2,941.72, including contingency. If there's no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Wonderful. The motion passes unanimously, 8-0. And item 10, new business. Item A, tax refunds.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the tax refunds that are presented in our packets.
We have a motion for approval.
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, I think we heard Bill's yes. Any opposed?
Yes.
Okay, wait. Sorry, Bill. Just confirm, you're in favor, right?
Yes.
Okay. And any opposed? On the tax refund? Okay, motion passes
Mr. Chair,
unanimously, 8-0. I wanted to thank everybody tonight for spending a few extra minutes maybe than planned. We did have 3 weeks off, so a little extra time tonight was warranted for the extra time that you had off. For really two really good presentations. All right.
Motion
now,
to adjourn.
Anybody else?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is 8:43. Thanks, everybody.